Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Driven Wild. Today we are talking about bill to enshrine gig work into federal labor law would effectively get rid of the minimum wage and overtime compensation. Yep, Uncle Sam is back at it again with trying to attack the gig economy, and quite honestly, I think we're getting tired of hearing all about this, but I do believe it's important to talk about because, quite frankly, this can actually change the future of what we do and how we do things. So with that said, I want to go over what this article is saying, how it actually is, and everything in between. With that said, let's get started. A bill introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives would amend U.S. labor law to establish a new classification for gig workers, denying them the right to a minimum wage and other employment protections. We never had minimum wage or employment protections. And most employment protections don't actually protect the employee because most employment lawyers don't actually protect the worker. They actually just say, I don't think we could do this, and then just don't do their job. The Worker Flexibility and Choice Act, or HR 8442, would change the Fair Labor Standards Act so that employee does not include a person who has entered into a worker flexibility agreement, such as workers for gig companies like Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, and others. The bill would amend the Internal Revenue Code to say that an individual who enters any such agreement would not be treated as an employee, and the employee for which that person performs a service would not be treated as an employer. I feel like this is just solidifying our work already. We're not considered an employee, we're considered an independent contractor. That's number one. Number two, we don't have bosses, so that's again the same thing. Nothing changed. Based on surface level everything, this is exactly what we were looking for. Solidification that we could work on our own terms. The bill introduced by Rep. Henry Kohler, D. Texas, and a co-sponsored Representative Elise Stefanik, R. New York, and Michelle Steele, R. California, calls for workers subject to worker flexibility agreements to have some rights guaranteed to employees, such as those related to privacy, non-discrimination, non-harassment, non-retaliation, and safety, plus time off under the Family and Medical Leave Act. It does not call for wage and hour protections to which employees are entitled, including rules on minimum wage and overtime, and would supersede all federal, state, and local laws on wages for workers in the Worker Flexibility Agreement. Well, first off, we never had a minimum wage, we never had overtime, we never asked for those things because that's not the business model. Non-retaliation, non-harassment, and non-discrimination are things that have been happening in the gig economy, but at the same time, we would end up trying to defend ourselves and we would get deactivated or shut up or put on the back burner and totally ignored because that's just how the gig economy worked. I don't think there was particular issues with privacy. In fact, I think most independent contractors came to the gig economy to maintain their privacy, because quite frankly, being in an office or a restaurant or whatever, those people had to deal with coworkers that talked and office politics and etc., etc. I do think there is something to be done with safety, whether it's car accidents or just injuries. We do need a little bit more protection on that subject, because quite frankly, DoorDash's, Uber's, and Grubhub's version of this is absolute trash. And then time off, we could just choose not to turn on. I mean, that's always been a thing. Would it be nice to have PTO? Yeah, but I don't think that we necessarily need that. The Bipartisan Worker Flexibility and Choice Act is important to ensure that our gig economy has the room and resources to expand, Kohler said in a news release. Well, we certainly do need the room and resources to expand. Is there a point to be made that the people who are probably making this bill are just doing it so that way they don't have to deal with all these legal problems anymore? Yes, and I think that's going to be a major issue across the board. Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, and other companies have been fighting to establish a new employment category that offers gig workers some protections without classifying them as employees, which should effectively cement their business models into law as they deal with continuing legal and regulatory issues related to their treatment of their millions of ride-hailing and delivery workers as independent contractors. In California, the company spent more than $200 million to pass a 2020 ballot measure that would exempt app-based gig work from state labor laws, though the measure has since been ruled unconstitutional in state support. I think they're referring to Prop 22 when they say that, and this is like a watered down Prop 22. There's no minimum, there's no overtime, but that being said, there is a certain level of protection here, but it was also proven that it was unconstitutional and unenforceable. So these companies can get away with whatever they want anyway. This federal bill would effectively get rid of the minimum wage and overtime compensation in one swoop, said Vina Dubal, a professor at U.S. Hastings College of the Law who studies the gig economy. The idea is in exchange, a worker would get flexibility associated with gig work, but this is a false dichotomy. Workers should have time flexibility and a wage floor, and they can under an employment model. Vina Dubal, to be 100% clear, is somebody who absolutely hates the idea that we're independent contractors, we can make money on our own terms, etc., etc. His entire statement here is trying to manipulate the situation, saying that we're misclassified and we shouldn't be independent contractors. I've actually covered her in another story once, I forget which one, but she's never been for the gig economy. Mark Spring, a partner at CDF Labor Law LLP, who represents management in union management deals, said that he thinks the legislation is a good starting point towards a middle ground in the continuing worker classification battle. But Spring says he doubts the legislation will pass if labor groups oppose it. This isn't a political channel. This has never been a political channel. This will never be a political channel. That being said, our House of Representatives, our Congress, our president are all Democratic. There are 4 unions. They're for labor rights, and they don't actually do anything. And regardless of whether or not you're Democratic or Republican, the fact is that this is probably not going to make it into federal law. Given that majority Democratic makeup of Congress and the position President Joe Biden has with respect to unions, it would make it difficult to get it through Congress and signed by Joe Biden, he said. Biden signed an executive order to create a White House task force to promote labor organizing. See, that's exactly my point. It's probably not going to happen. This is just a proposal. This is not law yet. Labor unions and labor law experts to create the newly introduced bill as anti-worker and warned against the expansion of the gig economy business model to other industries. Let's be honest, most labor unions are anti-worker. They claim to be anti-worker, and all they want to do is absorb money from people. Now, do I believe in the concept that workers should have more rights and more ability to fight back in the event that an employer is unfair or unreasonable, which happens a lot, by the way? Yes. But labor unions are not the way to go about that. They're proven ineffective. This bill isn't about worker flexibility. It's about contortion to let corporations deny workers' rights, protect wages, and job security, said Sean O'Brien, Teamsters General President, in a statement to Market Watch on Wednesday. I mean, look, there's probably ulterior motive with DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, all them, Lyft, Instacart. There's probably some ulterior motive. That's just a fact. That being said, we've never had protected wages or job security or really workers' rights that are actually enforceable in the court of law under normal circumstances, even in employee jobs. Think about it like this. How many times have you heard about an employee or a group of people that have been just abused in the workplace? Wage theft, abusive behavior, employment lawyers that don't actually do their job because they don't want to take the case. The fact of the matter is, we've never had these in normal jobs. Why should we fight for them in independent contractor work? Another union, Transport Workers Union of America, called the legislation dishonest. As much as I'm not a fan of unions, there is probably a certain level of dishonesty going on here. Claiming this bill provides anyone other than the bosses any benefit is a bold-faced lie, said John Samuelson, international president of TWU, in a statement. Well, first off, we don't have bosses, to be absolutely clear. Second, there is a certain level of truth to that. This is mainly better for the companies than it is for us because it basically solidifies their ability to keep independent contractors so that way they don't have to continue fighting these misclassification lawsuits that have been continuously attacking our ability to be free. In the summary of the bill, Cullors and his co-authors cite industry-backed studies that show most workers are happier working independently. The studies were conducted by MBO Partners, a company that provides consulting and other services for independent workers and their clients, and the Coalition and Workforce Innovation, a lobbying group whose members include Uber, Lyft, staffing company Kelly Services, American Staffing Association, and industry groups that represent trucking, construction, multi-level marketing, and more. Yes, we are absolutely happier working independently. I feel like I'm a lot happier just being able to do my work, not have to deal with office politics or people that are choosing not to do their job. I'm happier with that. I've worked in a lot of different jobs, and the only thing that's ever turned me off about a job was never about the job itself. The job itself was always simple to me. It's the people I was dealing with. It was the customers. It was the manager's inability to do their job. It was the politics. It was the evil bosses. It's the abusive bosses. That sounds like a nightmare. The gig companies have been quite successful in convincing most of the American and Western countries' public that flexibility can only be an alternative to employee status, said William Gold, professor emeritus at Stanford Law School, former chairman of the National Labor Relations Board, and author of For Labor to Build Upon, Wars, Depression, and Pandemic. I mean, the fact of the matter is that that's proven accurate. And based on experience, proven accurate. This would particularly impact people of color who have, for various reasons, fewer work opportunities, said Laura Payton, director of work structures for the National Employment Law Project. She said those opportunities are often in low-wage jobs that are often misclassified. Any member of Congress who supports this bill is not for working people, Payton said. I mean, has Congress ever really been for working people? Like, come on. This is my opinion. It's worth what you pay for it. None of you pay me. There you go. Do I believe that there's ulterior motives that are more beneficial for the companies than they are for us? Yeah. Do I believe that unions are not really for people and they're really for making money and manipulating people in that way? Yes. At the end of the day, both options look pretty terrible. Is there a lesser of evil options? I'm going to leave that up to your discretion. At the end of the day, all of the points they brought up are things that we have never had to begin with, we never really needed to begin with, or things that we did need, but we don't actually have the ability to fight back from anyway. This is just beneficial for the companies. However, I don't think that this is something to worry about because likelihood states that this is probably not going to get through to law. However, it is still 100% possible. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!